Honours was easily the hardest year of my academic life, yet it was also the most formative and I actually enjoyed it. So if you're about to start your undergraduate, your honours, you're halfway through, or you're just curious of what it's actually like, welcome to my new series, The Making of a Scholar, where I take you through my academic journey to demystify the ivory tower and what it takes to be an academic in the 21st century. One of the most common questions I get is, how did you manage to do everything in 1 year of honours? And honestly, it came down to a lot of time management, but there were also a lot of other things that I'm going to take you through today to show you that I not only finished, but also enjoyed and succeeded in the journey. So, I'm not sure how honours runs in other countries, but in Australia, in an arts degree, an honours year is primarily made up of independent research. You're writing a thesis, so I wrote a 25,000 word thesis. There was also 25% coursework, which was honestly the biggest struggle for me because as a medievalist, doing modern coursework was not exactly my cup of tea. So being able to have 75% of my final mark based on my thesis was such a blessing because I was able to pretty much get an entire degree being marked on the thing that I'm good at, which is medieval history. It was emotionally intense. I've already shared the story of how I didn't and then I did get into the degree. So I had the fastest emotional turnaround to go from 0 to 100 within the span of 2 weeks to go into the biggest year of my life thus far. There were also some very high expectations because I was very lucky to even have a position, and as an eldest daughter healing perfectionist, of course, once I had gotten that opportunity, you bet that I was going to make the most of it, and thankfully I did. But I built a lot of systems in order to make that a reality. This wasn't just a year of academic pressure, it was also one of personal growth, and I came out the other side a completely different person, and honestly that has been the greatest joy. So please do not think this is a productivity guide or a how-to. This is me genuinely just sharing my story and things that helped me succeed in arguably one of the most stressful years a uni student can go through before starting postgraduate work. The biggest piece of advice I will give anyone who is even considering honours is find a topic that you love. If you do not love the topic that you are studying, you are going to despise it by the end of 12 months. I was very lucky to kind of stumble onto my topic during my undergraduate degree, so I was able to go in with a semester's worth of research behind me, and it was then kind of filling the gaps, which honestly felt like I was researching an entirely new topic by the end of it, but I had that foundation and I knew what I was really interested in studying. So please find something that you are genuinely curious, passionate, want to know more about, because if you don't and you're just kind of doing it to fill a gap, you are going to wish that gap never existed, and it will make your year so much more difficult if you aren't actually excited and invigorated and looking forward to researching, because you are going to read hundreds of pages, dozens of articles, books. You might listen to a podcast. I don't know what research you're doing, but you are going to have to be marinating in this topic for 10 to 12 months. You are going to be sitting with chapters for months. You're going to be sitting with the arguments for months. And that can be really uncomfortable if you don't actually care. I personally looked at the memory reception / historiographical posthumous image of the King Athelstan. He's a 10th century English king, and how his posthumous image was used by 12th century chroniclers to impact, shape, and change their present, even though he died 200 years prior. I found it really important because I think the way history is written has such an impact on how we remember things to begin with. We have oral traditions, written traditions. Now we also have image traditions. Obviously they had paintings and that kind of thing, but we now also have videos, and I'm talking to you now through a screen, but they didn't have that in the medieval period, and so these histories were kind of their version of documentation, and they could just change it however they wanted to, and they use that in really strategic ways. And so that was kind of what I looked into, and now I'm going to be taking that methodology into my master's degree, doing something a little bit similar. I say a little bit, doing pretty much the exact same thing for a 10th century pope. I love that kind of period when information and education is really starting to flourish. I'm looking at the Demon Pope. I've posted a Substack on it if you want to read about it. He's a really cool dude. I am very excited for the next 2 years. But anywho, moral of the story, pick something you love, pick something you're passionate about, pick something that you could read and write about for at least 12 months. The next thing I did was start uncomfortably early with writing and research. And I didn't have 100% control over that because my first supervisor actually got pregnant and had to leave halfway through my honours degree, which I'm so happy for her. Her little boy is just the cutest cherub ever. I'm a little bit biased, but he is really cute. So that meant that I pretty much had until June to get as much as possible written. And I took that as a challenge of how much can I write within that time frame without going insane. And I ended up with 2 complete chapters, my 3rd chapter kind of halfway done, and dot points for my introduction. So I pretty much had almost a very loose skeleton of my entire thesis by June, and it was due in November. So obviously I hope that your supervisor doesn't get pregnant halfway through, because it was also really stressful trying to find someone else to supervise me. I didn't have a medievalist as my second supervisor. I had an early modernist. He was lovely. He was excellent. I love him dearly. He's a really cool dude, but I didn't have the same level of expertise. And so I really had to kind of trust myself and my research in the second half of my degree, because I was kind of going it alone, even with my supervisor. All of that to say is that you need to be writing when you don't think you're ready, because you will start writing and you will realize what you need to research. So I started with a case study in my 2nd chapter, and I was going through it and I was like, I actually have no idea about that topic. Let me go read on it. And then I would check the bibliography, and there are 6 more sources that I can get so much information out of. And you kind of naturally go through this cycle of reading, writing, realizing, and then going back to reading again. And it's kind of this reading, writing, realizing, research cycle. And that's pretty much what I did the entire time. And I turned out okay. Clarity isn't something that's going to come straight away. It's going to come from writing. And getting things done early will honestly be more of a gift than you think, because it will reduce your panic levels by significant notches. It also allowed me to go into things that I didn't think I'd have time to do. I was able to go back. I think I drafted the entire thing about 4 or 5 times. 20 to 25,000 words drafted 5 times. I saw significant improvement simply because I allowed myself time. And it also gave me confidence in myself that I've done the work, and the more work I do, the better position I will be in. And so what could be a very stressful year turned into a really enjoyable one, simply because I was getting feedback saying that what I was doing was on the right track. I was prepared. I was in my own lane. I was concentrating on myself. And I think being able to be a little bit selfish when it comes to research, and understanding that everyone else is going to have their own research methodology, they're going to run their lives differently, finding what works for you and doing it religiously will change your life. Please do not try my techniques. If they don't work for you, don't try someone else's techniques because they work for them. You actually need to find what works for you and stick to it like glue. So I'm an early morning person. I would get up early and read. I would get up early and do a little bit of drafting before I went to work. But if you're a night owl, just flip that and do it in the evening. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. I'm just going to share my experience and hope that you get something out of it that improves yours. With the whole kind of feedback thing in mind, the next thing that saved me was consistent meetings with my supervisor ×2. The whole maternity leave situation, having 2 supervisors, at the end of the day, it didn't matter because I was the person doing the writing, and whoever I was sending it to was able to give me feedback. But use your supervisor. They are there to supervise you and actually help. They can give you different perspectives. They could give you readings that you hadn't even thought about doing. They can also help keep you accountable. My supervisor would set me goals at the end of every single one of our meetings. So treat meetings as checkpoints, not deadlines, because they are meant to help you on your journey. They aren't meant to stress you out. You should not be stressed going into a supervisor meeting. If you are, you have not prioritized the right things. So please show up prepared. It will make you less stressed. It will make your supervisor less stressed. The whole thing will just be a whole lot more enjoyable because everyone has come to the table ready and willing to improve the piece of work in front of them. You will feel more fulfilled and you will feel like you are continuing on the right track because you have already done the work, and then you're just getting redirected back by your supervisor and you're continuing on your way. Feedback is always a chance to improve. They are not attacking you. I've been told that entire sections of my thesis made absolutely no sense, and why were they there? I couldn't tell you. I thought it was excellent, but I was wrong because I went back and reread it with that feedback and I was like, you're absolutely right. Why am I talking about charters when charters have absolutely no application to this discussion whatsoever? So I took that charters section and I popped it in what I like to call my paragraph paragraph graveyard. And so all of my dead paragraphs just live in there on the off chance that a source or a sentence or even an idea can come back into my work at some point in time. Do not delete anything you write, because writing is important. It shows your progression as an academic, as a person, as someone who is learning, and you never know when you may need that sentence again. So, sorry, little tangent, but back to supervisors. They are meant to be your collaborators, not just critics, because they can give you critical feedback while also collaborating with you on your project. And it is really important to frame that correctly in your brain, because that can really change the relationship between the two of you, and it will make the experience a whole lot more enjoyable. If there is one thing to take away from this video, is that you need to ask for help, because the faculty genuinely want you to succeed, but you have to meet them halfway. Because as much as academia can be intimidating and in this ivory tower and it's all cigars and whiskey and lovely billiards rooms, it's also a very human experience. If there's anything that the history conference taught me last year, is that academia is arguably one of the most human and collaborative fields you will find. So please ask for help with structure, with research, with how you actually start a thesis. I didn't even know how to structure a thesis. I asked my supervisor and she gave me a structure and she told me how to start because I asked for help. Just because you don't know something doesn't mean you are failing, because struggling in silence is not impressive. It just means that you don't know how to ask for help, and asking for help from others shows that you are willing to collaborate, and it shows that you actually want to improve the field that you are going into. The next thing that kept me sane, and arguably one of the most insane years of my life, was keeping hobbies and interactions with the outside world. You do not have to give up your life for your honors year. You do not have to give up your life for academia. It is not worth it. And life will just not be enjoyable if you do. So I kept my hobbies, I kept gymming, I kept bookbinding, I kept creating on social media, and it actually gave me some much needed space, and I felt like I worked better because I had time away from my research. Keeping things like hobbies and routines means that you are not going to lose your identity in your thesis and then come out the other side and not know who you are. And as I said, it gives your brain space away from research to actually reflect on it and then come back to it with fresh eyes, a clear head, and the realization that you are not defined by your word count. And let me tell you, thesis blindness is real. There were weeks when I would look at my thesis and I was like, that's the same thing. I'm actually just reading the same thing and I can't see anything wrong with it. There were things wrong with it. I just couldn't see it because I've been staring at the same words for so long that my brain just couldn't compute. So please, rest is a requirement. It is not a reward for doing your thesis. So things like going on a short or long walk, taking entire days off if you need to. I've recently taken up tennis and it has been very therapeutic to be able to hit something and not get in trouble for it. And once I came to this realization, it hit me that distance can actually give you better perspective than marinating in the research 24/7. And I was able to do all of this because I had such a clear structure of where I wanted to get to and the timelines that I had set myself, that I could work backwards to the point where I could pretty much plan out my days and know that I have a day off here and I have a 3-hour block there that I can get some research done. And so I would be able to formulate my weeks so I wasn't drowning in work, but I was actually enjoying the research as I did it. And this was all leading me to the point where I had a full draft finished, completed 1 month before my thesis was due, and this changed everything. It reduced my stress by miles. That's not even the correct measurement, but you get my point. I was able to go back and fine tooth comb that thing. I found some whopping great big holes that I would not have found if I was rushing to complete it, and I was able to go back, fill those holes, and I would not have gotten the mark that I did if I hadn't given myself the time to go back and draft the thing easily 4 or 5 times. And so in finding those gaps and being able to improve the argument cohesion of my entire work, I was able to edit calmly instead of finishing abruptly and just kind of hoping for the best. It would not be hyperbolic to say that I owe this degree to my faculty, and I could not have gotten through this year without my cohort. Being able to connect with 6 other individuals who are going through the exact same thing as me is priceless. You can support each other in ways that no one else can. So if there is one thing I can encourage you to do, is get to know the people that you are doing the degree with and stick to each other like glue. We would go on coffee dates, study sessions. We would be utilizing that peer pressure to be more productive, and it made the world of difference. But one of the biggest lessons I learned this year is the power of faculty connections. And you cannot put a price on this because you never know when you'll need a reference, mentorship, opportunities. I was able to get sources that weren't even published yet because my supervisor had connections outside of our university. And so now I've made a connection with that academic. And so the little connections family tree continues. And now I've got even more connections because I went to that conference that academic was at and I met more academics. I hope you get the gist. So please be kind, be reliable, be curious, and be authentic, because the more of those facets you show to faculty, the better chances you have in the future. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Honors can suck. There were times when it was awful and I cried and I was overtired and it was a lot. So please stay in contact with family, take care of yourself, but also understand that this is going to be 1 year that is going to propel you into a completely different version of yourself. It will give you intellectual independence. It will teach you about emotional regulation, discipline within yourself, and discipline when dealing with drama and other connections and people that you may not get along with or you disagree on their opinions on coursework. And so I'll specify that it wasn't the craziest year of my life because it was chaotic. It was crazy because of how much I grew as a person. So this is episode 1 of God knows how many, because I don't know where on earth I'm going with this academic career, but I wanted to bring you along because I know how mystic the academic world can be. I want to take you through the journey of applying for graduate degrees. We'll discuss rejection, resilience, funding, academic identity, research tips, and God knows what else, but I just want to show that academia is not dead. It is really exciting, and it is something that is well worth your time if you are a naturally curious person. So if you are starting your own academic journey, if you're on a self-led learning journey, or if you're just curious as to how people research history in the 21st century, I would love it if you liked and subscribed to follow along for my own journey into the 21st century academic realm. I would love to know where you're at with your journey, if there's anything I can do to help, if you've got any suggestions, questions, queries that I can answer to help you navigate yours. There would be nothing that brings me more joy. So with that, I will see you in episode 2. Bye!